just by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today. And thank you for your acknowledgements as well. I'm speaking today on behalf of my mother Nellie and brothers Stephen and sister Lindy, and as well as the whole Castan family. And we want to say that we are very proud and honoured to have our father's name attached to this terrific organisation, and particularly to this award. We'd like to specifically thank Peter and Mark and ABL and all the partners here for hosting this event and continuing to support it. And Peter, as Peter mentioned, we do go back a few years to our early days as students at Monash University, and I didn't actually go to university at 5 years old, so you can make your own calculations there. And Mark and Ron had a very long-standing and enduring friendship and shared many values and approaches towards Indigenous rights and the pro bono and public interest work in general. And this, I think, endures today through the firm's fundamental ethos, and in particular the great work done by Peter and his team with the firm's full support. And I'd also like to just take a moment on behalf of the family to congratulate tonight's winners who have dedicated so much of their time and their love to their work to benefit other people. Both Kathy and Dean are doing inspiring, generous, gracious work. They're actively pursuing social justice in Australia. They're helping people who are vulnerable and need help in their situation. And through these award winners' actions, they are standing up for people who couldn't necessarily stand up alone without that additional support. I think this is very important, and it reflects what my father taught us through his actions and through his words. We grew up watching Dad be involved in many social causes. We've spoken about Aboriginal land rights and other rights, but he did a lot of work in challenging anti-Semitism and racism. He wasn't afraid to take on government or other important people and take them to task in order to bring about justice and a better way of dealing with the issues that were contemporary. He worked on cases defending the free speech rights of animal activists, advocating against extensions of police powers, and did environmental work, particularly I remember work on the Franklin Dam in that very famous case. We never really sat around and wondered or thought about why our father was involved in these things. We just assumed that everyone did that. And we just assumed that people do whatever they have the skills and the capacity to do. If you have the resources and the ability to do things to help people, then you do them. It actually took a while for us to realise that that doesn't naturally happen in all families or all firms or all advocacy organisations, but it was just part of the environment that we grew up in. There was a lot of discussion around the kitchen table, as you would expect. We would hear about cases that Dad was involved with. I'm sure he tried to explain to us the legal basis of whatever it was, but we never really understood that. We just knew that he was going off to do things. But I think there were two main themes that emerged for us from his work. Firstly, Ron's Jewish values and his understanding of what it is to be a minority or an oppressed people who other people sought to destroy but who survived, underpinned his desire to address injustice to whatever extent he could. And that particularly manifested in his approach towards Indigenous rights in many different dimensions. And the speech that you referred to in the slide, Gary, was a speech that was delivered in 1998, and the fuller quote I'll read for you so you know. He said, "What was the meaning of my determination to do my part, never to permit a future destruction of the Jewish people? If I just stood by and participated in the bounty and opportunity of the Australian nation, what would that mean without doing something to expose and expunge the legal lie that lay at the foundation of the dispossession, disempowerment and attempted destruction of an oppressed group of fellow Australians?" He never lectured us on this or what we should do. he was just very resolute in his personal view that as Jews who had survived and thrived and been successful in Australia, we cannot stand by and watch what is the effective modern-day genocide of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and their culture. And this really underpinned his desire and his action in taking on cases that seemed quite impossible at the time, like the Mabo case or the Yorta Yorta case, and his impulse or his obligation to spur the nation not to shrink away from these complicated and difficult issues. Secondly, the other less known and possibly less heroic quote from Dad that underpinned, I think, his approach was try to walk softly and carry a big stick. And that's generally, he's not the only person to have said it, but we took this to mean do good deeds and contribute to society, not because you want recognition or not because you're trying to prove something, but because it is the right thing to do. And he never really made a big deal of that side of his personality or his work. He really wasn't one at pushing himself to the limelight very much. I think he's more famous now that he's not here with us than he probably was at the time, although I don't have a very good impression of that. I think what he's also saying is do what you can with your skills and your intelligence and your resources to whatever level those things are, and do it gracefully within the bounds of society's norms, but don't be afraid to push those boundaries a little bit if it's necessary. And like the award recipients tonight, he pursued change using his skills, which tended to be in advocacy and legal analysis, and always questioning the status quo and the assumptions that people had, particularly if they were misguided. It's good that Lindy's laughing. He also was quite pragmatic and realistic, and he said sometimes you have to be flexible and take immediate action if necessary. He told Stephen, my brother, that when some kids were yelling at racist names of him and some Chinese boys at school, that Stephen should go and punch them. And then said, but you'll have to turn yourself into the headmaster as soon as you do that. So Stephen went to school and punched the guys, and then went to the headmaster and said, I punched the guys because they were being racist. And fully went prepared to take the punishment that he was about to be dealt out. But strangely, he wasn't the one that was suspended from school that week. But it did provoke a wide-ranging discussion of racism and community in the school, and it was discussed at all levels in the classes, and both the name-calling and the punching never happened again. So I guess sometimes you do have to extend or even bend the rules and take concrete action when it's needed, and sometimes that involves running a 10-year, quite hopeless and complicated law case, and sometimes it's a more direct application, although I'm not, of course, in favour of any violent activities, but in the context it seemed appropriate. And so I believe that these values really continue to resonate in our family. It resonates in the Jewish community through organisations like Stand Up. It resonates through the work of lawyers and advocates, particularly as we've seen in Anna Bloch-Liebler, and again it resonates through this award and the work of its recipients, both past but also the present ones. The Jewish community in Australia is privileged in many ways and has wisdom from experience to know how important it is to stand up for people's rights, so it's very fitting that tonight's award goes to these tremendous recipients who have embodied the characteristics that Ron tried to teach us. They've shown excellence in their work. They're doing a fantastic job, so congratulations to both of them. We're honoured to be associated with this award, and hope that all the recipients, but tonight's as well, are able to continue walking softly but carrying that big stick. Thank you, Gary and Lillian, for having us here, and again, Peter, Mark and ABL for hosting the event, and thank you all for continuing to support Stand Up in the work that they're doing.